we are at the point where the bones of Achilles mixed with the bones of Patroklos have been placed into a golden urn that had been given to the mother of Achilles, Thetis, by the god Dionysus. And now we hear at line 80, over these bones a huge and faultless tomb was built. It was a tumulus that we, the sacred army of spear-fighting Argives, heaped up. And you notice I'm translating heaped up because it is heaping of a tumulus, although once the tumulus is heaped up, it's probably covered with stucco so that it shines from afar. And I say that because look how it's described. Visible, shining from afar, line 83, for men at sea. And then 84, now living, and for those that will be born hereafter. So that's very important that in the story, it's expected that the marker for the death of Achilles is sema, which is also a tumbos, that this marker will still be around when Homeric poetry is performed, whenever it's performed. So this is zooming into the present from the past. And I like the fact that it's also situated on a headland, which means as near to the sea as possible. It really is like a lighthouse. And in my book, Homer the Pre-Classic, I do a lot of research on exactly where this was. And it was on a ridge overlooking the Hellespont. The ridge is called the Ridge of Sigeion. And there was a very important city near the ridge that was in many ways sacred to Achilles. Meanwhile, the mother of Achilles is going to set up funeral games, and these funeral games are very much like the funeral games for Patroklos in Iliad 23. In fact, you could say that the funeral games for Patroklos are, in a sense, modeled on the funeral games for Achilles himself. So this is very, very important. Now we sort of think about Agamemnon again, just the way Agamemnon says, or the Psyche of Agamemnon says at line 87, you must have been present at funerals of many men who were heroes. And so you know how at the death of some great king, the young men do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But even you would have been amazed, most amazed in your heart to see these things. So that's how spectacular these funeral games were. You're accustomed to these things, and in fact, the audience of the Iliad is certainly accustomed to the funeral games of Patroklos, but this might be even greater, because after all, it's Achilles.
More spectacular.
Nothing could be more spectacular. And there's a wonderful expression, and I keep coming back to this in my research at line 91, episoi in the original Greek, in your honor. This is an expression that really zeroes in on the concept of hero cult and the ideology of hero cult, how when you do rituals like athletic competition, you do it to make up for something, and that's what this expression, episoi, which I translate as in your honor, is all about. And then we're getting to the wind-up. Even in death, your glorious name, Achilles, has not been lost, and you will have for all eternity, among all humankind, a glory, a kleos, that is genuine, Achilles. Well, there you are. This is what it was all about in the Iliad. And now, even in this retrospective from the Odyssey, we can see the glory of Achilles shining away just as it had been established in the Iliad. And who's the foil? I'm sorry to say, it's Agamemnon, line 95. As for me, what solace had I in this? That the days of my fighting in war were over. So, yes, we won in the Trojan War, but what do I get out of it in the end, in the bitter end? And what do I get out of all those words that went back and forth at the beginning of the Iliad? What a retrospective. And here it comes. For in the course of my homecoming, nostos, Zeus masterminded a disastrous destruction for me. And this word lugros is like a signature for how a certain kind of story will be, happy ending or sad ending, and lugros is the signature for sad ending. And not only that, but not only is his nostos lugros, but his wife is lugros. In fact, the two are related, just as the fact that Odysseus' wife is just the opposite of a disastrous wife. It means that he is the candidate for a non-disastrous homecoming, the kind that Agamemnon couldn't have.
Yes.
So here, Agamemnon is a foil not only for Achilles, he's also a foil for Odysseus. What a way to go down in history, if I can say in history, as a way of referring to the epic world, is Agamemnon is a two-way loser.
Yeah.
He's a loser to the competition he had with Achilles in the Iliad, and he's a loser to the competition he sort of has with Odysseus in the Odyssey, since Agamemnon's nostos is exhibit A for how a nostos should not happen.
Right.
And in his case, his wife actually kills him.
So it's interesting that he's pointing this out fairly clearly.
Oh, this is as clear as it gets. And again, I love the fact that this happens at the very end of what you might consider a package of the Iliad and the Odyssey. And you add them up, 48 scrolls. We started with the fight in scroll 1. Now we end with this resolution. Well, it's resolution for Achilles and Odysseus, but certainly not for Agamemnon, who's left in the dark.
Yes. It's interesting. Maybe it gives us a little peek into, how disastrous for him, but actually shows us the
positive side.
Positive side for.
I think what you just said is a very good way to introduce people to this literary critical concept of a foil, where you can't really appreciate something until you see what it's contrasted with. Mm-hmm. And Agamemnon is it. He's the foil for both Achilles and Odysseus.